Hello everyone, my name is Heather and this is Heather Travels, and I thank you for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I see are the top obstacles to our being able to travel again. The first obstacle to anyone being able to travel again is the virus itself. As Dr. Fauci said recently, people don't control the timeline, the virus controls the timeline. Scientists still have so much that they do not know about this virus. They're working as hard as they can. They're working day and night. They're studying it all the time. But because this is a novel virus, which means it's brand new, it has so many unknowns, and the scientists are just doing the best they can to try to catch up, to figure out exactly how it works. Things like, when does it contagious? Is it contagious before you show symptoms? How long is it contagious? How long can it affect you if you touch it on different surfaces? What is the R naught for the virus? I mean, I see new things in the news that they figure out about this virus every day that are scary. Did you guys see the thing about COVID toes? That's new. I saw an article yesterday about they've realized now that it affects the blood clotting in your body, and there's 30 and 4-year-olds who are getting it and have completely mild symptoms and probably would have been just fine at home, but then all of a sudden they have a stroke. I saw a really troubling article about tweens and teens who get the virus, that when they are hospitalized, they're in the hospital for an average of 14 days. That's a really long time. And when you think about the fact that you cannot be with them, I would not want Megan or Ben to end up in the hospital and be there for 2 weeks alone without me. That would be awful. They certainly don't want that to happen. I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that it's not just like, people seem to be thinking kind of like it's one extreme or the other. Either it's just kind of like a cold or the flu and you recover and you get over it and you're fine, or you die. And that's not it. There's a lot of variation in between there. And just the idea of a lengthy hospital stay, to me itself, is very traumatic. The only times I've ever had to stay in the hospital was when I had my babies. And even that, when you're only there 1 or 2 nights to have a baby, you still feel really disconnected from reality, and you feel, you want to get home. It's not comfortable. They're waking you up all the time to check on you and take your vitals and all that. You really can't get good rest in a hospital. And if you're going to have to be alone on top of that, without any visitors or without any family coming to see you or anything like that, and even the doctors and the nurses, when they come in, are going to be in those head to toe, suits to protect themselves, that would be very scary and very lonely. And I wouldn't want anyone to go through that. I don't want to go through that. I don't want my children to go through that. I don't even want my parents to go through that. So I think people need to recognize that there's a lot of other things that can happen to you and happen to your body besides those two extremes. And that can be very traumatic and have long, lifelong lasting effects. There's other things that can happen: lung damage, brain damage, all sorts of things. And the scientists still don't understand what all those effects are or what they could be. So there's so much that the scientists still don't know because this virus is so new, that the virus itself is a huge obstacle in us being able to not only travel, but do anything the way we used to be able to do it. So the biggest obstacle is the virus itself. The second obstacle to our being able to travel again is what I'm going to call legal restrictions. And by this, I mean things such as, right now, the border between Canada and the United States is closed to basically everyone. Also, the CDC has an order in effect stating that there can be no cruises out of the United States, at least. And there were some different criteria for how long that was going to last. But basically, the biggest one everybody's talked about is that it's 100 days. And it was 100 days from when that was put on the Federal Register, which was about April 10th, around there. So we're looking into, there's just not going to be any cruising happening out of the United States until the end of July or August, no matter what. And then the third thing I'm thinking about is that almost every state in the United States right now has some kind of stay-at-home order. Wisconsin's actually is currently one of the longest, if not the longest. Well, aside from, there are several states that don't have an end date on theirs at all. They're just, you're on a stay-at-home order until I tell you otherwise, the governor. And California is one of those, I think maybe Oregon and Washington, where they're just saying everybody stay home until we cancel it. So those would be the ones that could go longer than Wisconsin. And there's always the possibility that other states may extend their stay-at-home orders like our governor did. Those kind of restrictions, all of those stay-at-home orders say that you should not travel unless it's absolutely necessary. And people in my area, I can tell you, are taking that absolutely necessary pretty loosely. Most part, I guess people are staying home. Most of the places that I go, there's nobody around. When we walk around our neighborhood, I mean, we maybe will run into one other family walking or riding their bike or walking their dog, like one person walking their dog or something. Last night, the kids and I went for a bike ride around our neighborhood. We saw 2 other kids riding bikes. We passed one elderly gentleman walking his dog, and that was it. And we maybe saw 2 cars moving. That's it. So that's what it should be like. Troubles me a little bit when I go out to a different part of our town and I go to like Walmart and I see how many people are going in and out of there still. And I feel like a lot of that is unnecessary. I mean, I know people need to get things, but like we've resorted to just getting grocery pickup and that's all. The only thing I go out for, like in my car, is to get grocery pickup. I even change now so I don't have to go to the pharmacy. I'm actually having the pharmacy mail my prescriptions. So the only time I would get into my car is to pick up groceries. That's it. I've been on the same tank of gas for over a month because I haven't been driving my car. Those legal restrictions that are in place, closed borders, most of the borders of the countries in Europe are closed. State stay-at-home orders, the CDC order on cruise ships, those are the kind of legal restrictions I'm talking about that you can't overcome. I mean, as long as those are in place, you're not going to be able to cross those borders. And even like you could travel from state to state within the United States, but then a lot of the states are requiring you to self-quarantine for 14 days after you cross into their state, which if you only plan to be there for a couple days, well, that's not going to work. You'd have to be like actually like planning to stay in the new state to be able to do that. So really the movement between states is almost impossible as well. The third restriction to our being able to travel is just the simple fact that almost everything is still closed. As of the day that I'm filming this, every Disney park in the world is still closed. Shanghai Disney is taking some steps to set up some things with social distancing. It looks like they're planning on opening soon. Maybe by the time this video goes up, they will have opened, but that'll be an interesting experiment to see how that goes. Like theme parks, amusement parks everywhere are closed. I'm having a really hard time believing that anything's going to open this summer. All of the water park resorts, you know, even the indoor ones like Kalahari and Great Wolf Lodge and Wisconsin Dells, those are all closed. All the cruise lines are shut down everywhere in the world. And even here in Wisconsin, for example, 40 of our 66 state parks are currently closed. They had to do that because so many people were going to the state parks that they couldn't maintain social distancing like on the trails and stuff, and people were littering and vandalizing them. When everything is closed, where are you going to go? Museums are closed. Broadway's closed. Theaters are closed. There's nothing to do. You know, I mean, if you can't go to anything because everything is closed, all the attractions are closed, all of the tourist sites are closed. There really isn't any point in trying to travel, even if the legal restrictions weren't there, if those are taken away, if all of these places remain closed, well, that kind of eliminates your being able to travel. Okay, the fourth thing is practical restrictions. If you haven't watched Tim and Jen Tracker's video that they released on Wednesday, April 22nd, I'm going to link it up here. And in that video, they talk about what I'm saying here about practical restrictions. I was just fascinated by that video because every question, Universal had sent out a survey asking different things of people. I think they sent them out to annual pass holders maybe. And they asked all these different questions. Would you feel comfortable coming to the parks if we did this? And then they asked them all these different things. But what Tim and Jen realized when they were discussing it is every question that they asked them just brought up like 50 more questions. I can't even imagine being in the position right now of trying to run a theme park. what a nightmare. Watch that video and read some of the comments people said too. Like, I mean, even from a practical standpoint, like I have so many questions about masks. I wear a mask. We wear masks when we go out. Like when we went to pick up our groceries yesterday, Megan and I both wore masks. When we walk around the neighborhood, we don't wear them. But here's my thing. If we're going to have to wear masks, and I guess, maybe people that in Asian countries where they've been wearing masks for years, kind of it's just standard practice over there, maybe they have some insight into this. But my question about masks is, if you're wearing masks in public places and everything, that's great. But a lot of people pointed out, how are you going to wear those masks in the Florida heat? Like the employees, like if you want the cast members like at Disney to wear masks, how are they going to wear those when it's hot in the summer? I mean, Megan was complaining yesterday because she had that on for like 20 minutes and you feel like you can't breathe. If you have it on properly and tight enough and completely covering your whole nose and mouth, I can't believe how many people I see where they pull it down and they don't have it over their nose. You might as well not be wearing it. How would they wear that in the heat? And then my thing is, how do you eat and drink? How do you take a drink of water? How do you eat your food? I mean, then I guess the social distancing would have to come into play where you could take the mask off and you got to make sure the tables are far enough apart from each other. But somebody in the comments of that video said, how do you get a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old to keep their mask on? Good luck. So that video just brought up so many other issues. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg of the practicalities of trying to do this. So that video is all about like just Universal and theme parks in general, but you've got to think all of those practical restrictions are going to be an issue everywhere. They're going to be an issue at restaurants. They're going to be an issue at museums. They're going to be an issue at any kind of public place until we have a vaccine. Until there's a vaccine, I only have 2 possibilities in my mind, and this kind of takes me back to number 1, to the virus. I really only see a definitive solution to all of these problems being either we have a vaccine, which could take a very long time, years, or scientists have proven that recovering from the virus makes you immune. And they're not sure about that yet. They're not sure if that's true. Or it doesn't make you immune forever is another possibility. So, you're only immune to it for a short time. And then with that immunity thing, if they develop a reliable antibody test, because so far the antibody tests to test for the antibodies in your blood to show that you've had the virus or you've been exposed to it and your body has created antibodies to protect you from it. The antibody tests that they've created so far, I guess, have been a total disaster. They haven't been able to find successful ones at all. So until they can come up with an accurate, reliable antibody test and have that widespread so that people can start to know, okay, I've had it, I've recovered, I'm immune to it, until either that or a vaccine is out there, those practical considerations are going to be a major obstacle to people being able to travel or really do anything. Okay, the next obstacle to us being able to travel is going to be financial. Because of the economic effects of this pandemic, many, many people are just not going to have enough money to travel. They're going to have either used up their savings or they stopped saving or they've been out of work for so long they don't have any income coming in. They have been struggling just to pay their basic bills. And right now the government is kind of protecting us with certain things. I still haven't gotten any unemployment. I've been filing unemployment for 4 weeks. My case is under review, and I've talked to other people who work with me, and they're in the same boat. Nobody's gotten any money yet. So I don't know if I'm going to get any money. There's a lot of people, there's millions and millions of people in that situation where finances are really an obstacle for them to be able to do a lot of things. And so that will have long-lasting effects as well, because even, for sure there's going to be a recession. I mean, I'm a little nervous, is there even going to be another depression? And so economically, things are not good for anyone, for common everyday citizens, for businesses, for even big businesses. So that's going to be a real obstacle. We may see the permanent closure of some places, which would be really sad. And because of those practical considerations that I talked about in the last step, for example, the theme parks might have to severely limit capacity for quite a while until until the virus is no longer an issue. The cruise lines might have to severely restrict capacity of the cruise ships, even if they're allowed to sail, to maintain social distancing on the cruise ship and to put those things into effect. They may have to really limit how many people they have per ship. So it's going to be a long time before these places can be making the kind of money that they were before. Not only because they have to do things like that, but because fewer people are even going to be going to them because they can't afford it. So the money part is really going to be an obstacle to travel for quite a while. Another obstacle that's going to be difficult to overcome is reduced transportation options. What I mean by this is, in addition to the cruise ships, which I've kind of already talked about, flights have been cut severely. There's whole routes that they've taken out of service. The airlines have taken out of service. Amtrak has taken whole routes out of service and reduced others. So, maybe they used to have 3 trains a day that took this route, or and they've reduced it to 1 train a day. Or maybe they had, once daily service on this route, but now they've reduced it to twice a week. Airlines have completely eliminated some. I mean, like right now, I don't think you can fly direct from Minneapolis. Normally you can fly direct from Minneapolis to lots of places in Europe and Asia. I don't think you can do that right now at all. Because Minneapolis isn't one of those 13 airports that they designated as a place that people can fly into from other places, to get the screening when they land. And so I don't think you can get an international flight out of Minneapolis right now at all. So with reduced flights, reduced train options, no cruise options at this point, the only real transportation, you'll have very limited flight and train options, and then your own car. Some smaller airlines and smaller cruise lines might actually go out of business. So that's going to reduce the options too. And when the cruise lines reopen, they're probably not going to be using all their ships, and they're probably not going to be going all the places they used to go. They're going to be altering their itineraries to where they're allowed to go and to keep people close to home and things like that. So there's just not going to be as many transportation options for a while. Things are going to be fairly limited. So that's going to be an obstacle. And I guess this wouldn't eliminate you being able to do those things entirely, but it's going to eliminate choice. So you're going to have fewer choices of where you can go on a ship, on a plane, on a train, until they start bringing all those options back again. And that could take, quite a long time. And then the last obstacle to travel that we're going to have to overcome is people's comfort level and fear. And this may be one that for many people, it's simply not something that they are going to be able to overcome until those things I said, until there's a vaccine for the virus or widespread accurate antibody testing for the virus. I have to say, I kind of feel like I'm one of those. And the reason I feel like I am one of those people that I really don't know that I'm going to feel comfortable with certain types of travel, I guess, is because of those things I said about, I don't want my kids to be in the hospital for 2 weeks alone. I don't want to risk getting a stroke. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get this virus. I don't want anyone in my family to get this virus, because to me, that unknown of what could happen to us physically is too scary. It just seems like, at the beginning they were saying almost everybody's just going to be like a cold, and it's not going to be any big deal and you're going to get over it. Okay, yeah, for some people that's true. But more and more I'm reading accounts of people who said, their case was considered mild and it was still the sickest they've ever been in their entire life. Does anybody want to be sick? No. So, I just don't want to go through that, and I wouldn't want anybody else to go through that. And so if I can avoid that, I'm going to. So for us, being one of those more cautious people until it really is truly safe, until we can go back to life, except for a few recent outbreaks because of people who didn't get vaccinated, we get all our vaccinations in our family. Okay, you're not going to find anybody more pro-vaccine than me. My grandfather had polio and ended up with a limp his whole life. All of his siblings died of diphtheria when they were little. Okay. Do you want to be a parent who loses all your children except one to diphtheria? No. So my kids get the DTP vaccine. Okay. So there are people in the world who would give anything not to lose their children to these completely preventable illnesses. So vaccinate your kids, okay? I mean, vaccinate yourself. I just don't understand. That's a whole nother video, but I mean, I'm very pro-vaccine, okay? Measles is highly contagious. The R naught of measles is like 18, okay? I was explaining to my kids, before there was a measles vaccine, a person with measles could be in a room and another person, and then they could leave the room, and like 6 hours later, another person could go into that room and get measles. That's how contagious measles is, okay? So this is not that contagious, but it's still much more contagious than we want it to be. There was a time when measles and smallpox and, polio, which I said already, was super scary for people. And people have had to be isolating themselves like we're doing now all the time for different things like that until they came up with vaccines. And now, because, 90-some% of the population is vaccinated, you don't think like that anymore. You don't sit there worrying, like when your kids go to school, that they're going to catch measles or polio. You don't sit there worrying when you go to Disneyland, except for that little while there when people did get measles at Disneyland. But I mean, you don't sit there thinking when you go to a museum, I'm really worried that I'm going to catch diphtheria. You're not thinking like that because there's, everybody's widely vaccinated. You're not worried, that you're going to catch smallpox when you get on a plane. So until we can get to that point with this, I don't think, everybody can fully relax and breathe. We're all still going to be a little bit nervous. We're all still going to be wary of crowded places. We're all still kind of be eyeing each other like, do you have your mask on? Why are you coughing? Please don't sit close to me. So that's going to be a thing in people's minds and consciousness until we get to that point like we are with those other contagious diseases. So fear and comfort level is going to be a major thing that places have to overcome. And that goes back to that video that the Tim Tracker did about, all those practical considerations. For some people, those things will be enough and they'll feel okay about going to these places. But for other people, it's not. And so what that might do is it'll influence people's choices of where they go. So maybe until we get to that point where we don't have to worry about this virus anymore, which we don't know when that's going to be, until we get to that point, it might be that people will choose to go to hike in the mountains instead of going to Disney World. Because, you can keep your social distancing doing this, but social distancing there is just too challenging. Where do you stand in that? How do you feel? Like, what's your comfort level? How high is your anxiety about the virus for you and your family? That, how will that, I guess, influence your choices? And we're just talking about like a period of months or years here. Basically, I'm talking about until there's, sufficient herd immunity or there's a vaccine available. So in that period between now and then, however long that is, what do you see yourself doing as far as travel choices? So if we can take all those other ones away, except for the virus itself and fear, if all those other ones open up, so all the other ones I said, and the practical considerations, things open again, there's flights, there's trains, there's cruises, there's, the borders reopen, and say you've got some money, okay? So if all those things are eliminated, if we get rid of those obstacles, and what's left is the virus is still out there, and those practical considerations have to be taken into account, and then there's your personal feelings. What do you think you would do? I'm curious. I want to see where people are at. I'm still trying to wrestle with myself about what I would do. What do I feel comfortable with for me and my family? What would I need to see places put into place for me to feel comfortable going there? Where do I think we could go and still maintain that social distancing to a point that I would feel comfortable? So I'm curious to know how you guys feel and what you think, and put those in the comments below. So these are the obstacles that I see existing, that are preventing people from traveling and the things that we're going to have to overcome before we can go back to traveling the way we would like to. If you liked this video or found it interesting and informative, please give me a thumbs up down below. And if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, I urge you to please subscribe. Thank you so much for doing that. Just click on the red subscribe button below the video and click on the little bell next to it, and then you'll receive notification of all my videos when they come out. Thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. Safe travels.